The massive alien monitoring station drifted silently through the void between galaxies, its crystalline sensors constantly scanning for signs of intelligent life. Inside the station's control room, Lieutenant Commander Veltar adjusted his position in the command chair, his scaled fingers drumming impatiently against the armrest. Today felt like every other day in his 20-year career with the Galactic Council's exploration division, endless monitoring of empty space, punctuated by the occasional discovery of primitive microbes on distant worlds. Technician Mordok suddenly straightened at his console, all four of his eyes widening in surprise. The rhythmic beeping from his station grew more urgent as data streams cascaded across multiple holographic displays. Veltar noticed the change immediately and moved closer to examine the readings. "Report," Veltar commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "Sir, we have detected organized radio transmissions from the third planet in the Sol system," Mordok replied, his voice trembling slightly with excitement. "The signals show clear signs of technological origin. The inhabitants appear to call themselves humans." Veltar studied the rotating hologram of the small blue and green world that had appeared above the central display. The planet looked unremarkable, another water-covered rock orbiting a common yellow star in an outer spiral arm of the galaxy. Nothing about it suggested anything particularly special or dangerous. "How advanced are they?" Veltar asked, though his tone suggested he expected the answer to be disappointing. Mordok manipulated several controls, bringing up detailed analysis of the intercepted transmissions, primitive chemical rockets, basic nuclear technology, and crude electromagnetic communications. They appear to be confined entirely to their home world, with no spacefaring capability beyond their immediate orbital zone. Veltar nodded dismissively. In his extensive experience with first contact situations, species at this level of development typically posed no significant challenges to Galactic Council authority. They usually submitted readily to superior technology and accepted integration into the galactic community without resistance. Thousands of light years away on Earth, Dr. Alina Rodriguez worked alone in her laboratory at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, surrounded by banks of sophisticated radio telescopes and signal processing equipment. She had been monitoring deep space communications for over a decade, part of humanity's ongoing search for extraterrestrial intelligence. Most nights brought nothing but cosmic background radiation and the occasional pulsar signal. Tonight was different. Her equipment had detected something extraordinary, a series of structured transmissions that were clearly artificial in origin. The mathematical precision of the signal patterns ruled out any natural phenomenon she could identify. Her hands shook slightly as she verified the readings multiple times. Unwilling to believe what her instruments were telling her, she reached for the secure telephone that connected directly to the National Security Agency's Scientific Liaison Office. Director Thompson answered on the second ring, his voice alert despite the late hour. "Director Thompson, this is Alina Rodriguez at MIT. You need to see this immediately. We have detected what appears to be artificial signals from deep space. We are not alone." The implications of her words hung in the air between them. After decades of speculation and searching, humanity had finally received proof that intelligent life existed beyond Earth. Thompson's response was immediate and professional. "Dr. Rodriguez, I need you to secure all your data immediately and prepare for a classified briefing. A team will be at your location within 2 hours. Tell no one else about this discovery until we can assess the situation properly." 3 days of intensive analysis by the nation's top scientists and intelligence analysts confirmed Elena's initial findings. The signals originated from a location approximately 40 light-years from Earth and showed clear signs of advanced technological civilization. More disturbing were the secondary signals that suggested the aliens were not only aware of Earth, but were actively monitoring human communications. General Marcus Cole stood in the Pentagon's most secure briefing room, watching satellite images that showed perfectly circular objects, maintaining stationary positions above major population centers worldwide. The objects were clearly artificial and demonstrated technology far beyond human capabilities. They have been observing us for at least 72 hours, Cole reported to the assembled intelligence officials. Our best estimates suggest these are unmanned surveillance platforms, but we cannot rule out the possibility of manned vessels. CIA Director Rebecca Hayes studied the images with growing concern. Her years of experience in intelligence work had taught her to recognize threats, and everything about this situation screamed danger. The question is not whether they are watching us. The question is what they intend to do about us. Aboard the Zephyrian flagship orbiting Earth, Veltar reviewed comprehensive reports about human civilization compiled by his reconnaissance teams. The data painted a picture of a fractured species divided by nationalism, religion, and competing economic systems. Their technology showed promise, but remained centuries behind Galactic Council standards. Most interesting, too, Veltar were the psychological profiles his xenobiologists had compiled. Humans demonstrated unusual levels of aggression compared to most species the Council had encountered. Their history was marked by constant warfare, often conducted with shocking brutality. However, this same aggression seemed to drive their rapid technological advancement and remarkable adaptability. Recommendation: Veltar asked his chief science officer. Standard integration protocol should be sufficient, came the reply. Demonstrate superior technology, offer protection in exchange for compliance, and relocate the population to designated sectors for optimal resource extraction. Their aggressive tendencies make them unsuitable for positions of authority, but they could prove useful as manual laborers in mining operations. Veltar approved the recommendation without hesitation. In his experience, primitive species invariably chose survival over resistance when faced with overwhelming technological superiority. The humans would be no different. On Earth, President David Mitchell received the classified briefing in the White House Situation Room. The assembled military and intelligence leaders presented him with humanity's first confirmed contact with an alien civilization, along with clear evidence that these visitors had hostile intentions. "How long do we have before they make their move?" Mitchell asked, his face grave with the weight of responsibility. "General." Cole consulted his briefing materials before responding. "Unknown, sir. However, intelligence analysis of similar first contact scenarios from our historical databases suggests they typically allow a brief observation period before initiating formal contact. If their pattern matches other expansionist civilizations, we may have days or weeks at most." Mitchell stood and walked to the window overlooking the White House lawn, where tourists continued their normal activities, completely unaware that humanity faced its greatest challenge in recorded history. "Then we prepare for the worst and hope for the best. Activate Protocol Omega immediately. Contact every allied nation and begin coordination of our response. It is time to discover what humanity can accomplish when we truly work together for our survival." The orders went out within hours, initiating the most ambitious military coordination effort in human history. For the first time since the species had developed modern warfare, every major military force on Earth began working toward a single common goal, preparing to defend their world against an enemy whose capabilities they could barely comprehend. The morning sky above New York City blazed with artificial fire as the Zephyrian diplomatic vessel cut through the atmosphere. Citizens across the world watched their television screens in stunned silence as the massive craft, easily the size of a city block, descended with impossible grace toward the carefully prepared landing zone outside the United Nations headquarters. The ship's hull gleamed with an otherworldly metal that seemed to absorb and reflect light in ways that human eyes struggled to process. Secretary of State Amanda Clark stood at the center of a perfectly organized reception committee. her diplomatic training masking the fear that gripped her stomach. Behind her, military personnel from dozens of nations maintained rigid formation, their weapons lowered but ready. General Marcus Cole positioned himself slightly to her left, his weathered face revealing nothing of the calculations running through his mind. Every person present understood they were participating in the most important moment in human history. The alien vessel settled onto the reinforced concrete pad, with barely a whisper of displaced air. Moments later, a section of the hull dissolved away, revealing an opening that led into the ship's interior. Ambassador Veltar emerged first, his 7-foot frame moving with predatory grace. His reptilian features displayed an unmistakable expression of superiority as he surveyed the assembled humans with golden eyes that seemed to catalog every weakness and vulnerability. 2 smaller aliens flanked Veltar, their forearms carrying devices that immediately began translating his words into every major human language. The technology impressed even the most skeptical observers, producing perfect translations with no apparent delay or confusion. "Greetings, humans of Earth," Veltar announced, his voice carrying across the plaza with artificial amplification. "I am Ambassador Veltar of the Galactic Council, representative of over 3,000 civilized worlds. We offer you the protection and guidance of our ancient civilization." Amanda Clark stepped forward with practiced diplomatic precision, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. "Welcome to Earth, Ambassador Veltar. We are honored by your visit and eager to learn about your civilization." The formal pleasantries continued for several minutes as cameras recorded every word and gesture for posterity. Veltar seemed pleased by the respectful reception, interpreting human politeness as evidence of their natural subservience to superior authority. He gestured toward the United Nations building with one clawed hand. "Shall we proceed to discuss the terms of your integration into galactic society?" he suggested, though his tone made it clear this was not really a question. The negotiations took place in the UN's most secure conference room, hastily modified with the most advanced recording and translation equipment. Human technology could provide. Veltar settled into a specially constructed chair, while his assistants activated holographic displays showing star charts, population statistics, and resource allocation projections. "Your species shows considerable promise," Veltar began, activating a 3-dimensional map of human space. "However, your current territorial claims are completely unrealistic for a single-world civilization. The Galactic Council proposes the following arrangement for your benefit." The holographic display shifted to show detailed schematics of massive space stations and artificial habitats orbiting distant stars. Veltar explained with apparent kindness that humanity would be relocated to these facilities, where they could contribute their unique talents to galactic civilization under proper supervision. "We estimate that approximately 10% of your current population will be required to maintain essential services on Earth during the resource extraction phase," Veltar continued, seemingly oblivious to the horrified expressions on the human faces around the table. "The remaining 90% will be transported to suitable habitation facilities where they can receive proper education in galactic customs and technology." General Cole maintained his military bearing throughout the presentation, but his hands clenched involuntarily when Veltar casually mentioned that Earth's oceans contained minerals essential to galactic industry. The alien ambassador described the strip mining process with technical precision, explaining how the planet's surface would be systematically harvested over the next century. President David Mitchell participated in the negotiations through encrypted video link from an undisclosed location, his image appearing on a large screen at one end of the conference table. His expression remained carefully neutral as Veltar outlined humanity's future as a client species in the galactic community. "This is certainly a comprehensive proposal," Mitchell said finally, his diplomatic training allowing him to maintain composure despite the magnitude of what he was hearing. "However, such a significant decision requires consultation with our global leadership. We would need time to present these terms to our various governments and populations. Veltar nodded with what he clearly believed was generous understanding. Of course, primitive species often require time to accept the benefits of advanced guidance. 72 of your hours should provide sufficient time for your leaders to recognize the advantages of peaceful compliance. As the alien delegation returned to their vessel, the human officials remained in the conference room for several minutes, processing the implications of what they had just experienced. Dr. James Patterson, the administration's lead expert on alien psychology, was the first to break the silence. They genuinely believe we will accept these terms, he said, his voice filled with a mixture of amazement and outrage. Their records show 847 successful integrations using this exact approach. They expect us to voluntarily surrender our world and our freedom. Amanda Clark reviewed her notes from the meeting, her diplomatic mind already working through possible responses. The ambassador seemed genuinely puzzled by our request for time to consider their offer. I suspect they are accustomed to immediate capitulation from species they contact. General Cole stood and walked to the window overlooking the plaza where the alien ship rested. Their arrogance may be our greatest advantage. They clearly underestimate human resolve and our capacity for coordinated resistance. Within 3 hours of the alien delegation's departure, encrypted communications networks across Earth carried the most important military orders in human history. Every major military installation, intelligence agency, and government facility received identical instructions to begin immediate preparation for planetary defense operations. Colonel Lisa Morgan found herself promoted to Earth's first Unified Defense Coordinator, a position that had never existed because humanity had never faced a threat that required truly global military coordination. She stood before a holographic display that showed troop movements across 6 continents, watching as decades of international rivalry dissolved in the face of an existential threat to the entire species. Ladies and gentlemen, she announced to the assembled military commanders representing every major nation on Earth, we have 69 hours to demonstrate that humans do not negotiate from a position of weakness. Our enemy believes we will submit without resistance, because that is what every other species has done. They are about to discover that humans are not like every other species. Meanwhile, in orbit above Earth, Ambassador Veltar reviewed his fleet's disposition with complete confidence. 12 massive dreadnoughts anchored the formation, supported by 47 heavy cruisers and dozens of smaller vessels. The combined firepower represented more than enough force to pacify any resistance a primitive single-world species might attempt. Veltar had successfully conducted this same process hundreds of times throughout his career. The pattern never varied: initial contact, presentation of terms, brief period of adjustment, and peaceful integration. He had no reason to suspect that humanity would prove any different from the countless other species that had accepted galactic authority. What Veltar failed to understand was that humanity had just accomplished something unprecedented in their history. For the first time since the species had developed organized warfare, every human military force was working toward a single common goal under unified command. The aliens had succeeded in creating the one thing that had eluded human civilization. For millennia, true global unity in the face of a common enemy. The attack began without warning as dawn broke over the eastern hemisphere. Veltar's massive fleet, positioned in perfect formation above Earth's major population centers, opened fire with synchronized precision that spoke of centuries of military experience. The ambassador had grown tired of waiting for humanity's response, and decided that a demonstration of superior firepower would quickly end any thoughts of resistance. The first plasma beam struck Manhattan at exactly 6 a.m, Greenwich Mean Time. The energy weapon carved through the heart of New York City like a sword of pure light, instantly vaporizing everything within a 3-mile radius. The Statue of Liberty, the Empire State Building, Wall Street, and millions of human lives disappeared in a flash of superheated gas that could be seen from space. The shockwave that followed flattened everything for another 10 miles in every direction. London suffered the same fate mere seconds later. The ancient city that had survived the Blitz, the Great Fire, and countless other disasters throughout history ceased to exist in the span of a heartbeat. Parliament, Big Ben, and the Tower of London became nothing more than radioactive dust scattered on the wind. Beijing followed, then Moscow, then Delhi, then Sao Paulo. One by one, humanity's greatest achievements were reduced to smoking craters filled with molten glass. Deep beneath Cheyenne Mountain, in Colorado, the emergency command center that had been constructed during the Cold War to survive nuclear warfare now served as humanity's last coordinated military headquarters. General Marcus Cole stood before a wall of monitors displaying satellite feeds from around the globe, watching in grim silence as city after city vanished from the face of the earth. His military training kept his expression controlled, but his clenched fists revealed the rage building inside him. Major Kevin Barnes, a young intelligence officer who had been tracking global casualties since the attack began, approached the general with a tablet displaying updated death counts. His face had gone pale from the magnitude of the numbers he was reporting. "Sir, preliminary casualty estimates show approximately 2 billion confirmed dead in the first bombardment wave," Barnes said, his voice barely above a whisper. "They appear to be targeting major population centers, while completely ignoring our military installations and strategic facilities." Colonel Lisa Morgan, monitoring communications from resistance cells worldwide, looked up from a command station with an expression of cold fury. "That was their first and biggest mistake, General. They just proved to every surviving human on this planet that they are not here to conquer us or rule us. They are here to wipe us out completely." The secure communication system crackled to life with the voice of President David Mitchell, speaking from an undisclosed location deep underground. His words carried the weight of ultimate authority and absolute determination that only comes when a leader realizes that his entire species faces extinction. "All units, this is Phoenix Actual, with new rules of engagement. The gloves are off. Repeat, the gloves are completely off. All previous restrictions on weapons, tactics, and targets are hereby cancelled. These aliens have chosen to make this a war of extermination. We will accommodate their wishes, make them regret the day they decided to wake up humanity." The ground forces that began landing in major cities around the globe expected to find the usual pattern of shell-shocked survivors ready to surrender after witnessing the devastating display of alien firepower. Instead, they encountered something that their military databases had no reference point for understanding. These humans did not behave like any conquered species in galactic history. When faced with superior firepower, humans did not retreat. In panic, they adapted their tactics and found new ways to fight. When overwhelmed by superior numbers, they did not surrender or negotiate. They became more creative and more vicious in their resistance methods. When confronted with technology they did not understand, they captured examples and learned to use them better than their original creators. Captain Tom Bradley found himself commanding the defense of what remained of Los Angeles after the plasma bombardment had turned downtown into a glowing crater. The Hollywood Hills had been transformed into a landscape of twisted metal and broken concrete. But Bradley saw opportunity where the aliens saw devastation. He organized his surviving troops to turn every pile of rubble into a concealed firing position and every destroyed building into a death trap. "Listen up, people," Bradley radioed to his scattered units as they prepared defensive positions throughout the ruined city. "Remember the cities they destroyed. Remember the friends and family they murdered. Make every street they try to take cost them blood. Make every building they enter their tomb. Show them what happens when you mess with humanity." The aliens possessed technology that was centuries ahead of human capabilities, but they fought according to established military doctrines developed over thousands of years of galactic warfare. They followed rules of engagement that prohibited certain weapons and tactics as uncivilized. They maintained supply lines and communication protocols that prioritized efficiency over security. They treated warfare as a predictable science with known variables and expected outcomes. Dr. James Patterson, now operating from a mobile command post that moved location every few hours to avoid detection, observed the early battles with the trained eye of someone who had spent years studying alien psychology. His analysis of Zephyrian military behavior revealed a critical weakness that human forces could exploit. "They are fighting by the rules," Patterson reported to General Cole during one of their encrypted communication sessions. "They have specific protocols for acceptable weapons, legitimate targets, and proper treatment of prisoners. Humans appear to have abandoned all such restrictions when our survival became threatened. We are fighting like a cornered animal, while they are fighting like a civilized army." Within 48 hours of the initial invasion, Zephyrian casualty reports began showing numbers that exceeded all their computer projections by enormous margins. Their ground troops sent increasingly frantic reports about encountering human resistance fighters, who demonstrated no apparent fear of death and employed improvised weapons that violated numerous interstellar warfare conventions. Fleet Admiral Kethfer, commanding the orbital bombardment fleet, reviewed the casualty reports with growing concern. His species had successfully conquered over 800 worlds using these same tactics, but none of those previous campaigns had produced losses even remotely comparable to what they were experiencing on Earth. How are these primitives manufacturing chemical and biological weapons so rapidly? Kethfer demanded of his intelligence staff. Our projections indicated they lacked the industrial capacity for sustained weapons production during wartime conditions. His chief intelligence officer consulted multiple data streams before providing an answer that defied all previous galactic experience. "Sir, they appear to be converting civilian manufacturing facilities to weapons production at a rate our models indicate should be impossible. Factories that produced consumer goods yesterday are manufacturing military equipment today. Their entire industrial base is transforming faster than we believed any species could accomplish." Deep beneath the ruins of Chicago, Dr. Patricia Williams worked around the clock in a converted subway maintenance tunnel that had been transformed into a biochemical weapons laboratory. Her team of scientists, many of whom had lost their families in the initial bombardment, focused their grief and rage into developing increasingly lethal compounds specifically designed to target Zephyrian biology. "If they want to play the extinction game," Williams muttered as she loaded another batch of experimental biological agents into deployment canisters, "then we will show them exactly how good humans can be at making other species extinct." The phrase that had started with Captain Bradley quickly spread through every human resistance cell on the planet. Remember, the cities became more than just a battle cry shouted before combat. It became a sacred promise that humanity would never forget what had been done to them, and they would make their enemies pay for every life that had been lost. Admiral Michelle Thompson walked across the bridge of what had once been the Zephyrian heavy cruiser Devastator, her boots echoing against the alien metal flooring that human engineers had modified with Earth's standard gravity plating. 18 months of brutal warfare had changed her beyond recognition from the career naval officer who had once commanded destroyers in peaceful waters. Her face bore scars from the siege of Norfolk Naval Base, and her eyes held the cold calculation of someone who had learned to make the hardest decisions without hesitation. The massive warship now bore the name "Remember New York" painted in bold letters across its hull in both English and the alien script that humanity had learned to read with disturbing proficiency. Every captured vessel in the growing human fleet carried similar names: "Remember London," "Remember Beijing," "Remember Moscow." Each one a rolling monument to the billions who had died in those first terrible hours of the war. Lieutenant Robert Hayes approached Thompson's command station, his expression troubled as he reviewed the latest intercepted communications from the remaining Zephyrian forces. The young officer had aged years in the past months, his boyish features now hardened by experiences that no human military academy had ever prepared him for. "Admiral, we are receiving multiple transmission requests from what remains of the alien," Fleet Hayes reported, consulting his tablet with obvious disbelief. "They appear to be requesting a ceasefire and permission to begin formal surrender negotiations." Thompson's response was a sound that might have been laughter if it had contained any trace of humor or mercy. The noise that came from her throat was something colder and more frightening than anything the aliens had yet encountered from humanity. "Tell them we will consider their request for mercy after they demonstrate the technology necessary to resurrect 2 billion murdered human beings," Thompson replied, her voice carrying the same tone she might use to discuss weather patterns. "Until then, they can experience the same terror they brought to our world." The transformation that had overtaken humanity during the course of the war represented something unprecedented in the galaxy's recorded history. The same species that had spent centuries debating the ethical implications of various weapons and tactics now produced biological warfare agents with the clinical precision of a pharmaceutical company developing medicine. The civilization that had created international laws governing the conduct of warfare was systematically violating every principle they had once held sacred. Dr. Patricia Williams, now bearing the title Director of Biological Warfare for the Unified Human Military, conducted her briefing from a laboratory complex built deep beneath the ruins of what had once been Geneva. The irony of her location was not lost on anyone present. The city that had given its name to humanitarian conventions now housed humanity's most devastating weapons research. "Our latest biological agent specifically targets the Zephyrian respiratory system," Williams explained to the assembled military leadership, displaying three-dimensional molecular models on her holographic projector. "Initial testing shows a mortality rate approaching 97% within 6 hours of exposure. The agent disperses through their standard atmospheric recycling systems and remains active for approximately 14 days. General Marcus Cole, his uniform now decorated with ribbons representing victories that had never been imagined when those medals were first created, listened to the report with the same expression he might have worn while reviewing supply requisitions. The man who had once agonized over civilian casualties now approved weapons of mass destruction without visible emotion. "Acceptable parameters," Cole replied without hesitation. "Authorize immediate deployment against all Zephyrian forward positions. Priority target their command vessels and any facilities containing their leadership personnel." In the rubble-strewn streets of what had once been Berlin, Captain Frank Miller led his experimental combat unit through the twisted remains of the German capital. His soldiers represented something new in human military history, troops equipped with captured alien technology that human engineers had modified and improved beyond the original specifications. Their weapons fired energy beams that burned hotter than the original Zephyrian versions, while their armor incorporated defensive systems that the aliens had never thought to develop. Miller himself carried a rifle that had been built from components salvaged from a crashed alien fighter, modified with human targeting systems, and loaded with ammunition designed specifically to penetrate Zephyrian personal shielding. His squad moved through the ruins with the practiced efficiency of predators who had learned to hunt prey that possessed superior technology. "Remember what they said when they first arrived," Miller transmitted to his team as they approached a fortified alien position. "They wanted to see what monsters looked like. Today we give them a demonstration they will never forget." The intercepted Zephyrian communications that human intelligence services monitored around the clock revealed a level of fear and confusion that their psychologists found deeply satisfying. Terms that had never appeared in alien military reports began showing up with increasing frequency: uncontrollable human aggression, species-wide psychological breakdown, and systematic violation of all known warfare conventions. The final transmission from Fleet Admiral Kethfer was recovered from the wreckage of his flagship after human forces had systematically dismantled his entire battle group, using tactics that violated every principle of civilized warfare. The message, broadcast on emergency frequencies toward the galactic core, provided a chilling assessment of what the Zephyrian Empire had unleashed. Emergency transmission to Galactic Council leadership, the message began, Kethfer's voice filled with barely controlled panic. We have made a catastrophic error in our assessment of human capabilities and psychology. These beings are not fighting to achieve victory in any conventional sense. They are fighting to ensure the complete extinction of our species. Request immediate evacuation of all Zephyrian personnel from human space. We have awakened something that should have remained dormant. Colonel Lisa Morgan, now commanding humanity's first interplanetary strike force from the bridge of a captured Zephyrian dreadnought, addressed her mixed crew of human personnel and alien prisoners who had been press-ganged into service. The massive warship represented the pinnacle of galactic military technology, but under human control, it had become something far more dangerous than its original creators had ever intended. We have learned to operate their weapons with greater efficiency than they ever achieved, Morgan announced to her assembled officers, gesturing toward tactical displays showing human forces advancing through 3 different star systems simultaneously. We have taken their military doctrines and improved them beyond recognition. We have demonstrated what happens when you give human beings permission to abandon the restraints of civilization. Commander Janet Phillips, Morgan's executive officer, and a veteran of the defense of Washington, consulted her intelligence reports with grim satisfaction. The Galactic Council has officially requested permission to begin peace negotiations. They are offering full reparations and complete withdrawal from human space. Morgan studied the tactical display, showing the disposition of human forces throughout local space, noting the red icons that marked Zephyrian positions under siege by human task forces. Their request comes too late for consideration. They taught us that superior firepower determines the outcome of disputes between species. They demonstrated that civilian casualties are acceptable when achieving strategic objectives. Now they must live with the consequences of their educational program. The phrase that had begun as bitter joke among human military personnel, finally, a reason to get really nasty, had evolved into something approaching a religious motto for the species. Humanity had been given permission to abandon every moral restriction they had ever placed on warfare, and they had embraced that freedom with an enthusiasm that terrified their enemies. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in the ancient chambers of the Galactic Capital, a massive space station that had served as the center of interstellar government for over 10,000 years. Representatives from hundreds of species filled the curved amphitheater, their various forms creating a rainbow of alien physiology, united by a single emotion, fear. The holographic displays surrounding the chamber showed tactical maps that told a story no one had believed possible just 2 years earlier. Council Military Advisor Korthak, a veteran of countless galactic conflicts spanning 3 centuries, stood before the assembled delegates with his forearms trembling visibly. His species had evolved from apex predators, but even his warrior instincts recognized something unprecedented in the data streams flowing across his displays. Honored representatives, Korthak began, his translator rendering his words into hundreds of languages simultaneously. The situation in the Sol sector has evolved beyond all previous military experience. The humans do not fight according to any tactical doctrine in our databases. They do not seek territorial gains, resource acquisition, or political dominance. They appear to be pursuing the complete extermination of their enemies as a species. The chamber erupted in concerned, chittering, clicking, and various other sounds of distress as delegates processed this information. Several species had witnessed the Zephyrian Empire's expansion campaigns over the centuries, and none had ever seen resistance like what the humans were demonstrating. Meanwhile, on Earth, the planet that had once been considered a backwater world, suitable only for resource extraction, now served as the command center for humanity's growing interstellar empire. The surface still bore the scars of the initial bombardment, with massive craters marking where cities had once stood. But those wounds had been transformed into symbols of human determination rather than defeat. President David Mitchell, now bearing the physical marks of 2 years of total warfare, sat in the rebuilt White House Situation Room, reviewing the terms that humanity intended to present to the Galactic Council. His hair had gone completely gray, and deep lines marked his face, but his eyes held the cold fire of someone who had witnessed the worst that civilized beings could do to each other. Secretary of State Amanda Clark, her left arm still bearing scars from the siege of Washington when Zephyrian ground forces had nearly overrun the capital, read through the document that would reshape galactic politics forever. Her diplomatic training had been supplemented by hard-won experience in negotiating from a position of absolute strength. "Our demands are non-negotiable," Clark announced to the assembled human leadership. "Complete withdrawal of all galactic Council forces from the Sol system and a buffer zone extending 50 light-years in all directions. Full reparations for the murder of 2.3 billion human civilians, to be paid in technology, resources, and industrial capacity. Recognition of human territorial claims, extending to any star system our forces can reach and defend." General Marcus Cole, now bearing the insignia of Supreme Allied Commander of all human military forces, studied the tactical displays showing human fleet positions throughout 3 different sectors of space. "And if they refuse these terms," Admiral Michelle Thompson's voice crackled through the subspace communication system from her flagship deep in the Proxima Centauri system, where human forces were conducting what military strategists called pacification operations against remaining Zephyrian strongholds. "Then we provide them with a practical demonstration of the educational program they provided us," Thompson replied, her tone carrying the same casual menace that had become characteristic of human military communications. "Commander Phillips, please provide our status report on the Zephyrian colony world designated as Target Alpha." Commander Janet Phillips, now bearing the rank and responsibilities that 2 years of constant warfare had thrust upon her, consulted her tactical displays with the practiced efficiency of someone who had learned to plan genocidal operations with the same attention to detail that peacetime militaries devoted to parade formations. "Admiral, the planetary defense grid has been completely neutralized using their own siege weapons turned against them. All major population centers have been mapped and targeted. Our ground forces have confirmed that approximately 12 million Zephyrian civilians are present on the planet's surface. We are awaiting final authorization to begin the demonstration." The demonstration that followed was broadcast live to the Galactic Council chambers, ensuring that every representative could witness exactly what humanity had learned from their teachers, using captured Zephyrian siege weapons operated by human crews who had become expert in their use. The fleet systematically reduced the colony world of Zephyr 7 to molten slag over the course of 4 hours. Admiral Thompson provided commentary throughout the operation, her voice maintaining the same professional tone that military instructors used when explaining training exercises to students, honored representatives of the Galactic Council. "You are witnessing the practical application of the tactical doctrines that your Zephyrian allies taught us during their educational visit to Earth. Note, the systematic targeting of civilian population centers to maximize psychological impact. Observe the use of overwhelming firepower to eliminate any possibility of resistance or survival." The transmission continued as human forces methodically eliminated every trace of Zephyrian civilization on the planet, leaving nothing but radioactive ruins where millions of beings had lived for generations. The final image showed a world that would remain uninhabitable for thousands of years, a monument to the lessons that humanity had learned about the true nature of galactic civilization. "This concludes our demonstration," Thompson announced as the transmission ended. "We learned these techniques from our teachers in the Zephyrian Empire. They showed us that civilian casualties are not only acceptable, but strategically valuable. They demonstrated that overwhelming force represents the only meaningful form of communication between species. We have proven to be excellent students. The surrender came within 72 hours of the broadcast. Every remaining Zephyrian military unit laid down their weapons, and the Galactic Council formally accepted all human demands without modification or negotiation. The formal ceremony admitting humanity to the Galactic Council took place in the same chambers where the emergency session had convened, but the atmosphere had changed completely. Ambassador Amanda Clark stood at the podium where Ambassador Veltar had once offered humanity the protection of galactic civilization, but now she addressed the assembled delegates as an equal rather than a supplicant. Earth accepts membership in the Galactic Council with the understanding that we join as a sovereign species with full rights and territories, Clark announced, her words carrying the weight of the most powerful military force in known space. We are not seeking protection or guidance from our galactic neighbors. We are offering them the opportunity to coexist with us peacefully. The alien delegates listened in silence, many of them unable to meet her gaze directly. The species that had once dismissed humanity as primitive now whispered among themselves about the beings who had transformed the galaxy's most feared military empire into scattered refugees begging for sanctuary. We trust that all members of this council understand the new reality of galactic politics, Clark continued, her diplomatic smile carrying undertones that made several delegates visibly uncomfortable. Humanity has learned valuable lessons about the nature of interstellar relations. We hope that future interactions will be conducted according to the principles of mutual respect and peaceful cooperation. She paused, allowing her words to sink in before delivering the final message that would define humanity's relationship with the galaxy for generations to come. However, should any species forget these principles and decide to test our resolve, they will discover that we have become very good students indeed. We now understand that civilized behavior is a choice, not a weakness, and we are prepared to make different choices if circumstances require it. The galaxy had demanded to see what humans were capable of when pushed beyond their limits. They had received a comprehensive education in human potential for violence, and the lesson would never be forgotten.